Good evening, you're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Volodymyr Zelensky says giving up Russian-occupied land remains a sticking point in peace talks with Washington. This as US President Donald Trump hints that, quote, something good may be happening amid the fallout of his 28-point plan. We'll have extensive coverage tonight, including an exclusive interview with Garry Kasparov, a leading critic of Vladimir Putin. But first, the latest headlines. Were the saboteurs planning for years? New findings revealed after the attack on a Polish railway line. The ally of separatist leader Milorad Dodik wins a snap presidential election in Bosnia and Herzegovina's Serb-majority entity. And what a deal between Kyiv and Moscow could mean for Russia's economic return. But we begin tonight in Angola, where European leaders are insisting they will not sign off on a plan that compromises Ukraine's sovereignty. The continent's top political brass are in the capital city of Luanda for a business summit, which is being overshadowed by Washington's push to strike a peace deal with Kyiv. Africa correspondent Sophia Ba reports.
While peace negotiations gain momentum, European leaders gathered here in Luanda, and they all made one point very clear. Europe will not approve any plan that compromises Ukraine's sovereignty or favors the aggressor. The controversial 28-point US proposal is being revised, and leaders say Europe must have a decisive say in shaping it. Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that a peace deal cannot weaken Europe or Ukraine, and that no agreement will pass if it favors the aggressor or undermines Poland's security.
One thing is absolutely clear today. Europe is united, and the European unity is crucially important here. We would be in deep troubles, also Poland.
Germany echoed that message. Speaking here in Luanda, Chancellor Friedrich Merz confirmed that President Trump showed openness to develop a joint peace plan, but he stressed that Europe will not back any unilateral concessions from Kyiv.
About my telephone conversation with President Trump last Friday, as you know, I reported that he was open to a jointly developed peace plan. The representatives of Ukraine, the United States of America and the European member states succeeded in doing just that yesterday in Geneva, and we are now taking this message with us. We welcome the fact that these talks took place in Geneva. We also welcome the interim results. A number of issues have been clarified, but we also know that peace in Ukraine will not come overnight.
In a joint statement, EU Council President Antonio Costa and EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Europe has regained momentum and must be fully involved in shaping the peace framework.
It is also clear that the issues that concern directly the European Union, such as sanctions, enlargement or immobilized assets, require the full involvement and decision by the European Union.
Ukraine's territory and sovereignty must be respected. Only Ukraine, as a sovereign country, can make decisions regarding its armed forces. The choice of their destiny is in their own hands. I also want to emphasize Europe's centrality in the country's future. We will engage further tomorrow with our partners from the Coalition of the Willing.
So the message from Luanda is firm. Yes, there's momentum toward peace, but Europe insists that Kyiv must not be pressured into concessions and that the European Union must be part of every key decision. Sophia Ba, TVP World, Luanda, Angola.
At the same time, American and Ukrainian officials have wrapped up talks in Geneva, promising to keep working on the peace proposal over the coming days. Reports are also emerging tonight that some of Russia's maximalist demands have since been slashed from the original document. For more, let's go live to our correspondent Alex Cadier, who joins me from Brussels. Good evening, Alex. So how did this meeting play out and what happens next?
Well, good evening, Aaron. It seems that the first point of this meeting was taking 3 steps back, and that was followed by 3 steps forward. I'll break that down for you. We had this initial plan, which was drawn up in October by the US side, effectively shown to Ukraine a week ago. That prompted these really marathon emergency talks in Geneva, where the Ukrainian side flew in to negotiate with Marco Rubio and other US officials. Of course, that 28-point plan included massive concessions from the Ukrainian side that cross many of President Zelensky and the Ukrainian government's red lines, including giving away the parts of the Donbass region that Ukraine still controls, also limiting the Ukrainian military's size, also preventing Ukraine from ever joining the NATO alliance, and other concessions deemed unacceptable from Kyiv. Now, of course, that prompted a very rapid response from European leaders. You just heard that from our correspondent in Luanda, trying to get a seat at the table, trying to push back what they perceived against what they perceived as a very pro-Russian 28-point plan. Now, Aaron, the latest we have is that there is now a new 19-point plan agreed between Ukraine and the United States, one that both the Ukrainian and US sides say is positive, is constructive. The Deputy Foreign Minister of Ukraine saying that many of the elements that were contained in the old 28-point plan have been changed or scrapped in this new proposal. But crucially, you asked what happens next. Well, what happens next will be down to President Zelensky and President Trump, because the most contentious issues in this potential peace agreement, like territorial concessions, like NATO membership, like those political hot-button issues, are going to be the responsibility of the presidents, which means that although the noises from Geneva are positive, constructive, the Ukrainian and US side saying that progress has been made, there is caution there, because those two leaders will still need to hash out things that will be almost indigestible for the Ukrainian side. Perhaps why we've heard caution from Donald Tusk, saying he's not sure if we are closer to peace, and from Friedrich Merz, the German Chancellor, saying that this may be the start of a long process towards peace rather than expecting a breakthrough in the next few days. As I said, Aaron, 3 steps back, 3 steps forward. We may be exactly where we were before this Geneva meeting.
Alex Kadia in Kyiv, thank you. And Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk also says some of the clauses in Washington's offering are, quote, unacceptable, warning that no agreement can undermine the security of Poland or Europe. As defence correspondent Zuzanna Jurek reports, the proposed deal is even putting Euroskeptic President Karol Nawrocki on the same page as centrist Prime Minister Tusk, following America's suggestion that European jets could be stationed on Polish soil.
Hi guys.
In the midst of proposals and counter-proposals on a peace plan for Ukraine, for Warsaw, one point from Washington's draft stood out. Point number 9, which says that Poland would see European fighter jets stationed on its soil. To some, this suggests that Warsaw was not consulted on decisions pertaining to its defense architecture, a notion deemed impermissible by Polish officials.
Some of these proposals are unacceptable. It is particularly important from the Polish perspective, and this was also my opinion, that no agreement, and I emphasize none, can be allowed in any way to undermine the security of Poland and Europe.
While experts note that lack of Warsaw-Washington consultations is unacceptable, this proposal
is actually not substantively a bad clause. There are European Air forces, in fact, American warplanes, ought to be stationed in Poland, and the whole process of talking about Poland without Poland is foolish and harmful. The actual substance of this clause is not terrible.
While PM Tusk insists sacrifices to Allied security are a no-go, Polish President Karol Nawrocki took the opportunity of the bilateral meeting with his Czech counterpart Petr Pavel to echo that Russia remains the biggest security threat to Warsaw.
We believe the Russian Federation to pose the biggest threat to security and democracy across the whole of Europe.
Though seeing the nominally Euro and Ukraine-skeptic president and the pro-EU centrist government speak with one voice is a rare sight, experts note it's imperative for Poland's political standing in a moment like this.
Its European partners look at it and wonder what
What exactly is Poland's foreign policy? Does it come from the government or does it come from President Nawrocki? Ukraine is fighting for Europe's defence, but Poland is the next line, it's the next bastion.
For TVP World, Zuzanna Jurek.
Staying with Poland now, and local police have detained a third suspect linked to a railway sabotage attack earlier this month, which officials say was executed on Russia's behalf. The detainee stands accused of helping the two men who carried out the explosion and then fled to neighbouring Belarus. Anastasia Yanchenko has more.
A week into Poland's investigation into the sabotage of the country's railway network, Polish authorities have detained a third suspect, Volodymyr B., who allegedly acted on behalf of Russia's intelligence services.
Volodymyr B's role included transporting one of the perpetrators in September 2025 to the locations of the planned acts of sabotage, namely areas around the towns of Mika and Gołąb, where they conducted reconnaissance and selected the areas for future operations.
The sabotage near the village of Mika hit two sections of the strategic Warsaw-Lublin railway, a route that is a key domestic travel and aid to Ukraine. Earlier, Poland has charged two Ukrainians as the principal perpetrators behind the sabotage. Immediately after the attack, the suspects fled to Belarus, and Polish authorities are seeking their extradition. Ukrainian nationals recruited by Russian intelligence are increasingly linked to sabotage operations in Poland. Last week, in a separate incident, another Ukrainian was charged with hiding documents, including a Russian passport. Analysts say Russia aims to kill two birds with one stone.
The kind of ultimate purpose of those activities are to divide the society, are to also cause distrust in public authorities, in the safety and security of the country.
In the aftermath of the railway attack, Poland launched an anti-sabotage campaign dubbed Operation Horizon. Up to 10,000 troops, including from the Territorial Defense Forces, Special Operation Forces, as well as cyber engineering and drone units, are monitoring railway routes and key transport hubs to prevent further sabotage.
We'll definitely need a more permanent solution to that. We cannot constantly use either Territorial Defense Forces or operational units of the Polish Armed Forces to patrol railways, other infrastructure. It will be good to increase in size the military police.
The operation is scheduled to run until the end of February, but Poland appears to be facing a longer campaign to secure its rail and energy infrastructure, which remains a potential target for Russian sabotage. Anastasia Yanchenko, TVP World.
A close ally of Bosnia's former Republika Srpska leader Milorad Dodik has come out on top in the entity's snap presidential election. Dodik was ousted from office by Bosnia's court, but is expected to have a loyalist in Siniša Karan, whose victory is set to be confirmed in the coming days. Our Balkans correspondent Paweł Czaskowski explains.
Siniša Karan will be the next president of Republika Srpska, appointed as a candidate by Milorad Dodik, who was removed from office by the verdict of the Bosnian court. Karan is almost guaranteed to continue his mentor's secessionist policies.
I will continue where we left off. We will not allow a break in power, and this represents precisely the continuity of the power of the presidential office that has lasted for 3 years. I will continue with even greater determination, and together we will continue to build Republika Srpska.
Karan's victory means that Milorad Dodik, despite the ban, will be able to shape Republika Srpska politics from the back seat. But as Karan won by a small margin, the results of the election are also a warning for Milorad Dodik and his party.
Karan will be a president for less than 1 year. And I think this election was really a red flag for the ruling government in Republika Srpska. It shows that even with the election frauds and irregularities, it was difficult for them to win because the difference between two candidates was very low. So I think that if opposition in Republika Srpska stay united, they have a chance to win the next general election and to change also how the government on the state level looks like.
In the general elections that are scheduled for October next year, Milorad Dodik will still be unable to run for post given his ban. Another stand-in will then be needed to do the job for him. From Banja Luka in Republika Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina, I'm Paweł Trzaskowski.
Donald Trump has deployed trade envoys to Brussels as he pushes to finalise a deal with the European Union. Despite reaching a broad agreement in July, the Transatlantic Pact has not yet been ratified, with tensions over aluminium, steel and agricultural goods. Our EU correspondent Angela Scoogens reports.
Representatives of the €1.6 trillion transatlantic relationship, that being the EU and the US, faced off in Brussels on Monday to hammer out why the directive signed in July has not been implemented in full. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen signed the document alongside her counterpart, US President Donald Trump, months ago in Scotland. Both parties agreed that American products inbound into the EU would face virtually no import duties. However, European goods travelling to the United States would be slapped with a 15% tariff. Despite the agreement, there has been a stalemate in delivery. Both representatives from these bodies agreed to continue the dialogue.
We must act strategically and swiftly, and I would expect my team to travel to US in coming weeks to engage on all these issues.
It's a living, breathing deal between two great economies, the great economies of the earth. So let's finish this, let's get that foundation solidly in the ground, and then we're going to build upon it, and it will continue to grow.
TVP World asked an expert what could be garnered over the next few weeks and whether this would steady markets as well as traders.
It's always tricky, especially with this US administration, to know whether the argument is that it's going to be a final one, or if it's more, should see it more as a temporary.
Members of the European Parliament are expected to legislate the EU's side of this trade agreement by March earliest. However, EU diplomats are stating they are exasperated by the glacial pace of EU politics. The big question is whether they can wait until next year to see that delivery from the EU. What is clear, however, is that time is money. Angela Scoogens from Brussels for TVP World.
We return now to Russia. In just a moment, I'll speak exclusively to leading critic of Vladimir Putin, Garry Kasparov. But first, an inside look from our business editor, Jakub Kapishevsky, into the impact of sanctions on the Kremlin's economy and the boom that could follow if a peace deal was struck today.
As a peace agreement between Russia and Ukraine appears on the horizon, European politicians underscore that sanctions on Moscow are really taking their toll.
We cannot give up the pressure, our collective pressure on Russia, at a time when Moscow is experiencing very serious economic and financial problems. We must maintain the policy of sanctions because they really do work.
But the question remains, what would happen if Russia and Ukraine reached a deal and sanctions were lifted?
The sanctions are lifted, or at least there is a hint that they remain as they are without imposition of secondary sanctions and the likes, then it will be a boon for the Russian economy.
One major consequence would be Russia's return to international financial markets.
If the sanctions against the Moscow exchange and the central bank are lifted, then it would allow an inflow of foreign capital, and it would be easier for the government to borrow money.
Exiled from the global borrowing market, Moscow has depleted more than 2/3 of its rainy day fund in a bid to plug the hole in the budget. Sanctions relief would also allow Russia to offload oil and gas at better prices. Currently, the Kremlin is forced to sell oil at a discount, even $20 per barrel. However, the economic clock wouldn't be wound back to pre-2022 times.
I think that by and large, Russia has already lost its European gas market. I mean, pipeline gas. But oil, why not?
Still, experts are skeptical that American companies will make a full return, at least in the years to come.
That would be, one level up. And all the all the risk officers in those companies would be extremely nervous at the prospect of investing in Russia while things are as they are.
But any kind of economic boost will come in handy amid sluggish growth. According to Moscow's central bank, the Russian economy will grow this year by a mere 0.5 to 1%.
And joining me now for an exclusive interview is Garry Kasparov, chairman of the Renew Democracy Initiative and critic of Vladimir Putin. Good evening, sir.
Good afternoon.
Much has been made of this US-backed peace plan for Ukraine. Donald Trump says big progress is being made. There are also reports that Kyiv has been able to negotiate out some of Russia's maximalist demands. In your mind, are we closer to a ceasefire than at any point in the last 4 years?
It's amazing that you use the word ceasefire while the whole report that we saw before talked about peace. And there's a huge gap between those two. Peace under Vladimir Putin's rules is unachievable for a very simple reason. Putin is war. The entire algorithm of Putin's power is based on war. I viewed this report, this few minutes report just prior to this into my interview, as a kind of the science fiction, because there's not a single indication. When you look at Russian budget, at Russian propaganda, at Russian economy, at the whole element of Russian routine life, that indicates that Putin regime is trying to take Russia away from this war mentality. To the contrary, everything indicates that the war efforts will be stepping up. Of course, they need cash. Of course, they need sanctions relief. But for, as you said, ceasefire, I think there is a chance. I still think remote a chance that there will be a ceasefire. But ceasefire will be used by Putin regime to prepare for further aggression. It may not be necessarily Ukraine, because according to Putin, and that's not I'm telling you, I'm simply trying to translate it from Russian, they still believe that the goal of this war is to change the power balance in Europe and to restore, if not territorially, but at least through indirect influence, the greatness of Russian empire in Soviet days, which means a full control, political control of Eastern Europe, Poland included.
Let's then talk not just about the ceasefire, but also about a long-lasting peace. I mean, I guess the question is, you've got President Volodymyr Zelensky under fire at home. He's now under pressure from Washington. Do you sense that these talks could be Kyiv's last hope?
I'm totally confused. Why you said Zelensky and Kyiv. Ukraine is not losing the war. These 28 points is the scheme presented by a corrupt Trump administration. And it's not surprising that the key individuals in the talks were Witkoff and Kushner, not American officials. From Russian side, it was not Minister of Foreign Affairs, also Putin's puppet, but it was Dmitriev, Putin's, some call Russia Putin's wallet. It's a business deal. And they're very important to look at the financial arrangements where they try to have American hands, read Kushner, Witkoff, and others, on the $200 billion frozen in Belgium for America basically to control the reconstruction of Ukrainian funds. It's a blatant corruption. It's nothing to do with peace. Now, the conditions being gradually improved, there's a European plan which may offer some hope for the ceasefire. But the problem is Putin will not accept it. Putin wants Ukraine to be totally dependent on Russia. The 28 points, if accepted, would mean the end of Ukrainian sovereignty, no matter what's written there. And of course, it will allow Putin to concentrate forces to continue his pressure on neighboring countries, including NATO countries. So that's why I think that there will be some sort of an agreement reached between Ukrainians and Mark Rubio, official American delegation. Whether it will be accepted by Russia remains to be seen. But the key is, again, don't say last hope. Ukraine successfully alone defended most of its country against Russia, while Europeans and Americans, yes, offered assistance, but nobody wanted to get in direct confrontation with Vladimir Putin. And of course, all these talks about restoring relations with Russia is basically justifying the aggression. If you think that the accepting Putin's terms and offering an excuse, exoneration for war crimes, and rewarding Russia with territories like Crimea or Donbass will help the world climate. You probably have to read some history books to learn otherwise.
The thing is, in President Zelensky's address to the nation, he told us that Ukraine faces a choice between losing a major partner or losing its dignity. And some would say that without their major partner on side, without Washington, it's possible that Ukraine would, yes, keep its dignity, but lose more land and be forced into more concessions than what's on offer right now. Do you see that thinking?
Again, this is the 28 points is not about concessions. It's a capitulation. Ukraine is not in the position now just to beg for ceasefire and to offer territorial concessions. One of them is basically to give up the main fortification line in Donbass, which will make Kyiv basically defenseless against further Russian aggression. By the way, look, let's not pretend otherwise. I spoke just recently at the Halifax Security Conference with many European officials, top officials, and they all know that Putin's aggression will not end. Europe is preparing for war. You look at European budgets. They're building, just in more and more provisions. So they're trying to strengthen their defense lines in the Baltic countries, in Finland. Poland is ready to mobilize if necessary. So look, everybody knows that Putin's plans are not limited by Ukraine. So how Ukraine can simply, accept these terms that would mean Putin's direct control of Ukraine and Ukrainian politics. So I believe that Europe will basically force Trump administration to come up with the reasonable plan. But this reasonable plan will not be, most likely, will not be accepted by Russians. I hope it will be. But again, Putin's intentions have not changed. And again, you simply have to listen to Russian propaganda and to Russian official statements to recognize that the only way to end the war is to destroy Putin's war machine. And that's why every conversation, every talk about ending sanctions or even sanctions relief is just fueling Putin's war machine.
So, Mr. Kasparov, to put it on a straight bet, do you believe Washington is trying to sell Ukraine out, that it sees that President Volodymyr Zelensky is, in Washington's mind, weakened at the moment and is just trying to make a business deal out of it?
I should again correct you. You said Washington. I said Trump and Trump's cronies. I still believe Trump is not America. Trump is not Washington. If you hear many senators, including Republican senators, they had the most blatant refutations of this position. It's almost it's condemnation across party lines. And
so, Mr. Kasparov, you're saying it's a king's court, that Donald Trump is the king.
That's the case. It's a king's court. It's a Byzantine politics. It's bad for America that now we don't have the same institutions that typically worked in America, especially for foreign policy decisions of that magnitude. But Trump is getting weaker. I mean, let's not ignore this fact. Even many Republicans are not yet departing from him, but definitely trying to put a distance. And these deals had universal condemnations by practically every corner of American politics. So that's why, even with all Trump's powers, he's not the king yet, thanks God. And he's not Vladimir Putin. So with Trump's admiration to Putin and with Trump's fealty to Putin, so the only person on this planet that he's loyal to 100%, I don't think this deal can materialize in the way that Russia's presented it. And by the way, everybody knew that these 28 points was just a ChatGPT translation from Russian.
The deal as it stands, I mean, is this basically, or would this give a green light for President Putin's imperialistic ambitions beyond Ukraine? I mean, does it risk being, for example, another Yalta-style agreement?
Oh, absolutely. No, this deal would, if it, again, I don't think there's a chance this deal in this form will be accepted, because Zelensky is also not king, and he's the president of the free nation that made huge sacrifices to defend its freedom. And the Ukrainians will never accept the territorial concessions. Again, Zelensky said it, and every Ukrainian politician, top politician, said it. And I think it's a mood of Ukrainians. I met many of them now in Halifax a few days ago. It's not going to happen. The Donbass will not be given away. And also, Ukraine will never accept the territorial losses to Russia de jure, even if de facto this territory is still being occupied by Russia. But again, this deal is one step of Vladimir Putin's imperial plan that he laid down 20 years ago, talking about restoration of Soviet empire, to subdue other countries, if not through direct military intervention, but through massive political pressure. And of course, if NATO accepts this plan, NATO is dead. It becomes a piece of paper with 4 letters, NATO. And of course, another big winner in this case will be China. And I think the future of Taiwan will be dire, if not hopeless, if Ukraine loses war.
Well, let's talk about Taiwan adjacent, because I want to ask you about this proposed amnesty, this idea that all of Russia's actions in the war would be wiped clean as part of this agreement, that from a legal perspective, history would be wiped. I mean, what precedent does this set in the world as we know it?
That means the end of the United Nations. That means the end of all the international institutions that have been built after World War II. That means that we're going back to square one. And that's why every dictator, not Vladimir Putin, every dictator in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, could do whatever. And of course, it opens a very dangerous, perilous chapter in human history. Everybody understands. The reason for Vladimir Putin hopes to get away with his horrendous crimes his regime committed is nuclear weapons. Which means that, if you want to commit crimes, you need to get nukes as a guarantee that nobody would touch you. So the end of it will not be just the end of the United Nations and other international institutions, but also the end of proliferation regime. And we'll start a new era where the nukes will be spread across the world. And of course, if you have so many countries that potentially could go nuclear, for instance, I'm sure Taiwan will go nuclear, Japan will go nuclear, South Korea will go nuclear, Saudi Arabia will go nuclear. That's not rocket science these days. And that means that the risk of the devastating war can only go up.
Now, lastly, we're running out of time, but historian Niall Ferguson says wars are ended either by victory or by compromise. Are we in a world where Ukraine and Europe might need to accept that it will not win back what it has lost, and that it must, in some ways, compromise?
No, I think compromise means the war will continue, because Putin made war, as I already said, an algorithm of his power. Now, victory, it's not necessarily, storming a Kremlin and taking over Moscow. Victory is destroying Putin's war machine, and it's doable. Putin's economy is not in a good shape. It's yet not in free fall, but it's moving in this direction. And if Ukraine is provided with all the weapons it needed, if Russian sanctions are just, even kept at this level, and of course there's so much room, to make them even more biting, so then it can work. Putin cannot continue this war indefinitely if the free world is united behind Ukraine, and instead of some very ambiguous statements, will clearly state Ukraine must win, which means restoring Ukrainian territorial integrity and destroying Putin's war machine, which is permanent threat, not only to Ukraine, but to Europe.
Mr. Garry Kasparov, thank you again very much for your time, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us here on TVP World for more. I'm Aaron Darman. Good night.